The biology amphitheater at the Galactic Academy was buzzing with chatter. Species from every corner of the Orion Spur filled the tiered seats. Scaled dravicans flicked their tongues in curiosity, crystalline ventari whispered through mind links, and even a pair of stoic synthlings had their ocular lenses trained on the center stage. Today's lecture promised something exotic. At least that's what Professor Calith promised in the campus comms. Nera, a juvenile sarath with iridescent scales, coiled tighter around her seat rail, tail flicking in anticipation. She whispered to her neighbor, a soft-furred zenth. "They say it's a live predator, something dangerous from a Class 6 Deathworld. Can you imagine?" The lights dimmed. A hush spread like mist. Professor Calith, his plumage immaculately groomed, stepped into the spotlight. His eyes glowed faintly blue as he interfaced with the lecture node. A hologram spun above him, images of fangs, claws, dense jungles, violent storms. "Students of Xenobiology 401, Calith crooned, feathers ruffling. "Today, you witness one of the most resilient predators ever catalogued, apex among apexes, forged in an environment lethal to most carbon-based life." A hush, a hiss. The side door slid open with a pressurized sigh. Two armored handlers wheeled in a transparent containment sphere. Inside, crouched on muscular haunches, was a creature like no other. Upright posture, bilateral symmetry, thin hide-covering coiled muscle, no talons, no venom sacs, yet its eyes flicked around the room with uncanny awareness. Some students recoiled. A synthling's lens flickered red, recording every twitch. "Behold," Calith intoned, "the human Deathworlder, subspecies, Terran sapiens, considered sapient, but we are here to study its predator traits. Notice its forward-facing eyes, an ancient hunting adaptation." Whispers rippled through the rows. "Does it understand us? Is it safe? They said it eats meat, fresh meat." Calith raised a claw for silence. "It is harmless within this stasis field. Observe and take notes. Few living predators can sustain such a dense skeletal frame and maintain high cognition under the oxygen load of a Class 6 biosphere." He tapped the control node. The field flickered, just for a moment, to demonstrate the creature's restrained power. In that instant, the human locked eyes with Nera. And it smiled, a slow, unnerving curl of lips, rows of herbivore teeth, yet the threat behind that grin made every prey species in the room shrink back. Nera's frill flattened tight to her skull. Her heart hammered. This was no mere specimen. This was a Deathworlder, and somehow it knew. The containment sphere hummed softly, a low ionized sound that barely rose above the murmur of notes being scribbled and psychic thoughts being shared across telepathic species. But even that hum couldn't smother the tension in the room. Professor Calith was in his element, pacing before the class with a flourish in every step. "Now observe the subject's unique musculature, refined not through genetic tampering, but natural selection under extreme planetary pressures, tectonic instability, predatory megafauna, unpredictable climate cycles." Behind him, the human crouched calmly inside the containment field, head cocked just slightly, as if listening. Nera could still feel the ghost of that smile on her scales. She kept glancing at the field projector's energy rating. 98%, then 97%. But that was normal, right? A synthling raised a hand with its gleaming metallic digits. "Professor, the safety protocols. Should we not reinforce the ion barrier?" Calith waved the comment away with a lazy flick of feathers. "Quite unnecessary. The human is docile. We've scanned for aggression biomarkers. Its threat levels are passive. Curiosity dominates. Primitive empathy, perhaps. Remarkable for a predator." Suddenly, bang! A jolt rocked the containment unit. The lights flickered. The projector sputtered, briefly, and for half a second, the field blinked off. It was enough. The human moved, not lunging, not attacking, just stretching, arms overhead, back cracked. A casual yawn, but the effect was immediate. The Dravacan in the second row hissed and slithered under the bench. A feathered Sulith emitted a distress scent so strong the front row recoiled. Even the Synthling's optical array trembled slightly. The human simply stood, unbothered by the sudden fear storm he'd triggered. He took 2 calm steps forward, raised a hand and waved. Then, in perfectly spoken galactic common, he said, "Hi, is this where I'm supposed to sit still and be terrifying?" Silence. Every student stared. Even Professor Calith froze. "You speak common," he choked. The human raised an eyebrow. "Well, yeah, I've got a translator node like everyone else. Did nobody read the intake form?" A nervous laugh escaped a Zenth student. The tension cracked just a little. The human looked around, amused. "You're all acting like I'm going to eat someone." He paused, shrugged. "I had a sandwich earlier. You're safe." Laughter, hesitant at first. Then scattered giggles, even from the Synthling's voice boxes. Professor Calith cleared his throat, still trying to salvage academic dignity. "Yes, well, fascinating development. This class is an example of adaptive cross-cultural cognition." The human turned toward the exit. "So, am I done being gawked at, or is there a cafeteria around here?" The door hissed open automatically. No one stopped him. And as he left, Nira finally exhaled, frill relaxing. He hadn't attacked. He hadn't roared or snarled. But somehow, that had made him far more terrifying. By the next rotation, the lecture hall buzzed like a disturbed hive. Word had spread far beyond the xenobiology wing. The Deathworlder wasn't just a specimen. He was now officially enrolled as a student. Some said it was a clerical error. Others whispered that the human must have threatened administration. But no one dared ask him outright. Nira got there early, too restless to sleep after yesterday's shock. She found the human already sitting at the middle bench, legs stretched, arms crossed behind his head, tapping his foot to music only he could hear through tiny earpieces. When she approached, his eyes flicked up, sharp but friendly. "Morning. I remember you. You didn't scream yesterday. Gold star for you." Her throat frill flushed violet with embarrassment. "I don't usually scream. My species prefer tactical retreats." He laughed, a low, rolling sound that seemed more unsettling than any roar. "Fair enough. Name's Jonah, by the way. Jonah Ward. You?" "Nira Takali. Xenobiology 2nd tier." "Cool. I'm Xenobiology 0 tier, because I know nothing about any of you." He winked. It was infuriatingly casual. Before she could answer, the room's gravity adjusted with a soft hum. Professor Calith swooped in, wings fluffing in visible annoyance. He avoided Jonah's eyes. "Class, let us continue our curriculum. Today's specimen is a rare apex hunter from the acid swamps of Droz Prime. Unlike yesterday's anomaly, this creature has no concept of empathy. Observe and do not engage." A bulky cage hissed forward on anti-grav rails. Inside, a sinewy reptilian beast, its scales dripping faint acidic vapor that etched micropits in the floor beneath. It growled, a sound that rattled the reinforced glass. Jonah leaned toward Nira and whispered, "Looks like a big, angry iguana with rabies." Nira choked back a laugh, earning her a scandalized glance from a synthling behind her. Professor Calith shot Jonah a glare, then tapped the cage's console. "This predator's hunting efficiency rivals early human pack strategies. It—" Clang. The cage dented outward. The swamp beast slammed again. A hairline fracture zigzagged down the containment panel. Jonah stood up slowly, eyes narrowing. He glanced at Calith, then back at the terrified students edging away from the cage. "I'm guessing there's no off switch for that thing." No one answered. The beast slammed the cage again. The fracture spread, an audible crack under the humming shield. Nira's frills stood on end. She whispered, "Jonah, don't move. If it escapes—" "Oh, it's gonna escape," he said dryly. Then he cracked his knuckles. "Which means it's my lunch break, or I wrestle a space crocodile. Guess I'm skipping lunch." One final slam. The cage split. The acid swamp predator lunged forward, straight into Jonah's outstretched arms. In a blur, the human pivoted, grappled the beast by its thick neck, bracing against its thrashing claws. The room erupted in shrieks, feathers, squeals. But Jonah only grunted, muscles corded, boots skidding on the polished floor. "Somebody get me a stun rod before I—" With a choked snarl, he slammed the beast against the wall, once, twice, until the predator fell limp in his grip. Dead silence. Jonah looked at the shocked class, still holding the unconscious swamp creature like an oversized dog. "So, does this count as extra credit, Professor?" The swamp predator was returned to its cage, mostly unconscious, tail twitching in a bruised dream, while the lecture hall sat in stunned silence. Professor Calith's feathers were still ruffled from head to talon. He stared at Jonah like he was a black hole in human skin. "Mr. Ward," the professor's voice cracked. "This was highly irregular. Security protocols—" Jonah shrugged, wiping blood from a fresh claw cut on his forearm. "Hey, you said observe." Didn't want to engage, but I like my face unscratched. Neera couldn't stop watching him. The way he casually bound his wound with a strip torn from his sleeve made her frills shiver with an emotion halfway between horror and admiration. Then the door panel snapped open. 4 armored Federation enforcers strode in, visors opaque, weapons humming. Behind them slithered a bureaucrat draped in the blue and silver robes of the Galactic Federation's liaison corps. Gasps fluttered through the class. Jonah tilted his head. "Hi. You guys the welcome wagon?" The liaison, a thin, scale-plated Eldarian, ignored him and addressed the professor. "Calith, by Federation Statute 277, Section 8, uncontained lethal fauna, civil endangerment, unauthorized specimen interaction. This human must be restrained and questioned." Before Calith could stammer out a defense, Jonah held up his hands, more amused than afraid. Whoa, you want me to sit in a box because your zoo broke?" The enforcers advanced. Their leader raised a stun baton. Neera's instinct screamed run, but her feet rooted her in place as the scene unfolded. One enforcer lunged. Jonah sidestepped, effortlessly. Another swung the baton. Jonah caught the wrist mid-swing and twisted, sending the armored giant crashing to the floor with a thud that rattled every seat. "Let's not do this," Jonah said, voice low but steady. The liaison hissed, flaring its throat fins. "Human, you are a danger." "Yeah, maybe," Jonah cut in, "but a danger to who? I saved your fancy students twice. Where's my thank you? A fruit basket? Free lunch card? No? Just shackles?" For a breathless moment no one spoke. The air vibrated with tension, not from the human's voice, but from the sudden, razor-edged calm he projected. Something primal, something Deathworlders were infamous for. Professor Calith cleared his throat, claws clacking nervously. "Perhaps an investigation without a holding cell, liaison. Clearly the human is cooperative." The liaison fumed, but the enforcers hesitated, none eager to be the next to taste the floor. Finally, with a disgusted flick of its tail, the bureaucrat hissed, "Very well, but mark this, Deathworlder. The Federation observes all." Jonah sat alone in a metal-walled chamber deep inside the Federation administrative complex, a place students whispered about, like a haunted labyrinth where secrets went to suffocate. A single chair, a single table. One dim light overhead flickered now and then, reminding him how old even high-tech bureaucracies could be. He tapped the table with a bored rhythm, humming an old Earth tune. He wasn't scared, but the longer the silence dragged, the more his skin itched with the desire to break something just to hear a sound. Finally, a hidden door hissed open. A trio entered. The robed Eldarian liaison, who'd hissed at him before. A Talari intelligence analyst with data rings orbiting its long fingers. And at the center, an old human man in a Federation uniform so decorated it looked like it might collapse under the weight of medals. Jonah straightened. Didn't expect to see another Homo sapiens in this antique vault. The old human regarded him like a wolf studies a cub testing its fangs. Jonah Ward, raised in the rust belts of New Detroit, no official military training, but enough bar fights and urban survival to rival a squadron. Sound about right? Jonah shrugged. Add Likes cheap coffee and you've nailed it. The Eldarian flicked its throat frills impatiently. Human, you embarrassed the Federation Security Division. You engaged lethal fauna without permission. You assaulted enforcers. And you treated the liaison with— Jonah barked a laugh. Disrespect? You people keep calling my entire species Deathworld abominations. My mum used to say if someone slanders you, give 'em a reason, the Talari analyst interjected, calm as moonlight. Mr. Ward, do you know why we watch your species so carefully? Jonah leaned back, boots on the table, eyes daring. Because we don't break easy. The older human officer finally spoke again. His voice was weary, but with a steel core no age could rust. They're afraid of us, Jonah. Afraid that a Deathworld species that can tame monsters and outwit Federation enforcers might one day tame the stars themselves, without permission. Jonah lowered his feet, intrigued despite himself. So what's this? A job offer or a threat? The Eldarian bristled. Both. You will cooperate. You will allow us to study your biology, your reflexes, and you will remain under Federation surveillance indefinitely. Jonah cracked his knuckles. Or what? Silence. The old officer didn't smile, but a flicker of respect crossed his weathered face. Or you do what humans have always done when cornered. You survive, you fight back, you rewrite the rules. Personally, I'd rather have you on our side, son. Jonah grinned. Then say it plainly. You want me as your pet predator on a leash, the Talari murmured. Not a pet, Mr. Ward, a partner. We want to learn how your kind bends the universe's worst nightmares to your will. Jonah stood, stretching his shoulders, muscles rippling under torn fabric. Fine, I'll play lab rat for now. But I get conditions. 1, good food. 2, freedom to walk where I please. 3, no more stun batons, or I break the next one over the wearer's skull. Deal? The Eldarian hissed, but said nothing. The old officer chuckled. Deal for now. Jonah leaned forward, eyes glinting under the flickering light. Then buckle up, Federation. You just handed a Deathworlder the keys to the cage. Outside the interrogation room, hidden surveillance feeds captured the exchange. Across the stars, silent alarm bells rang, for some feared a new question more than any predator. What if humans are more than monsters? What if they're teachers? For monsters. 3 weeks later, Jonah Ward stepped out of a Federation dropship and into the howling winds of Exelon 4, a mining world quarantined for biological hazard containment. Officially, it was overrun with genetically engineered predators gone rogue. Unofficially, the Federation had lost all control and was hoping no one would find out how bad it really was. Jonah adjusted his new armored jacket, not quite standard issue, but it fit him like a second skin, reinforced with human ingenuity and alien tech. He inhaled the bitter wind and cracked his neck. Beside him, a squad of Federation security officers shuffled uneasily, their stun rifles humming. Stay behind me if you want to keep your legs attached, Jonah said, grinning at the squad leader, a nervous Avaxi with feathers bristling in the storm. They advanced through the abandoned mining colony, metal catwalks, half-buried loaders, blood trails long dried to black streaks in the dust. The shriek of the wind sometimes carried back something else, a low chittering that made even the hardiest alien merc recoil. When the first predator lunged from the darkness, a six-legged nightmare of scales, fangs, and acid saliva, the squad fired in panic. Energy bolts seared its hide, but barely slowed it. Jonah didn't flinch. He met the beast head-on, sidestepped at the last heartbeat, then slammed his armored forearm into its throat. With a guttural snarl, he drove a combat knife into the soft gap under its skull. It collapsed, twitching. See? He panted, flicking green blood from the blade. Think like prey, you die like prey. Think like me? You become the real monster in this story. The squad watched him, eyes wide, weapons forgotten for a moment. The rest of the mission was a blur of claws, fire, and human roars that shouldn't echo from a creature with no fangs or scales. By dawn, The worst of Exelon IV's apex predators lay broken in Jonah's wake. Not all dead. He knew better than to wipe them out completely. Some ecosystems needed monsters to stay balanced. Back aboard the dropship, bandaged but unbowed, Jonah sat opposite the Federation liaison who had once hissed insults at him. "You did it. You neutralized a Class 5 predator nest alone," the liaison rasped, still disbelieving. Jonah leaned back, exhausted but defiant. "No. We did it. I taught your security grunts to stop squealing and start hunting back. Maybe next time you won't need a human boogeyman." The liaison hesitated. Then, in a rare show of vulnerability, it lowered its crest in a gesture of respect. "Perhaps we misjudged your species." Jonah barked a dry laugh. "Understatement of the century. Tell your bosses this. Humans aren't just deathworlders. We're nature's last insurance policy. If you ever forget that, well..." He tapped the scar on his forearm, still stinging from a predator's bite. "I'll be right here, fixing your messes, or becoming the bigger mess if you screw with us." The dropship engines rumbled to life. Jonah glanced out the viewport as the predator-infested wasteland shrank beneath him. In the Federation's data feeds, analysts were already rewriting threat classifications. Some trembled at what this lone human implied about Earth's true potential, but back on Earth, no one knew, no one cared. In the bars and scrapyards Jonah once called home, life went on. Blind to the fact that somewhere among the stars, a single Deathworlder had taught an entire galaxy a lesson they'd never forget. Never corner a human unless you want a new apex predator.